Construction Time Again, Some Great Reward, Black Celebration. 3 Depeche Mode albums which fans often refer to as the Berlin Trilogy. Let's dive in deep. Hello to you, my friend. I hope you're well. And if you're new to this channel, please hit that subscribe button. If you're a Depeche Mode fan, this is the channel to be. Do stick around till the end of this video because I've got some very, very exciting news for you if you're in the London area, or even if you're not. We have a first of its kind Depeche Mode event. Never been done before, so you don't want to miss the info on that. Right, today we're talking all about the Berlin Trilogy. The Berlin Trilogy is a phrase coined by Depeche Mode fans when they refer to the Construction Time Again, Some Great Reward, and Black Celebration albums. These albums were sort of done between 82 and 86, and this was sort of Berlin was just a very, very important part of this. Martin Gore was living in Berlin at the time. I think Gareth was as well, Hansa Studios, and Berlin is just very, very important in the history of this record, which leads us to the question, would these records sound different if they were produced and released in a different country? It's a debatable question. Some people think it doesn't make a difference where you record. I, however, seem to think that your environment and where you live and everything does influence you at the time, you know, with the culture and the arts and whatever's around you at the moment. We all know that Martin got into his kind of kinky phase. Martin, you kinky bastard. So it is all of these things and more that made these records what they are. This to me is a very, very important period, and I think most Depeche Mode fans will agree. Depeche Mode have been around for over 40 years, and with starting off with Speak and Spell all the way up until Spirit, although they've had their sound, there has been a lot of innovation and diversity in their sound. And what I mean by that is, with a catalogue that big and with a fan base kind of, you know, different in age group and stuff like that, people are sort of divided as to what their favorite albums are. For instance, a lot of people don't like the last album. They don't like Exciter, and so on. I find records like Violator are kind of like, I haven't met a fan that doesn't like Violator. Funny enough, there are fans that don't like the Songs of Faith and Devotion, which is interesting. But the point I'm trying to make is I've never met a fan that does not like the 3 albums from the Berlin Trilogy. I think all Depeche Mode fans are in unanimous agreement that this was a very, very important period in Depeche Mode's history. And what I like about this period was, this to me was the most creative of the Depeche Mode periods. Now, what I mean by that is, that's not to take away anything from, I mean, let's bear in mind, this band really peaked with Violator and Songs of Faith and Devotion. But to me, this period was very, very important because this Berlin Trilogy period was really the time, it was just the time where technology was, sampling was kind of in its infancy, and it was also the band really trying hard to prove themselves not to be, you know, disposable pop artists. Because let's face it, the first album, Speak and Spell, which we love, it was very, very poppy with hits like New Life, Just Can't Get Enough. The fact that they looked 12 years old as well did not help, and this did mean that although they had loads of adoring teenage fans, this did mean that everyone saw this as a short-lived band and they were not going to be taken very seriously. Fast forward, Vince Clarke leaves. Martin, you taking the driver's seat as the songwriter. We then get the second album, which is very, very different in tone and sound and feel to the first one, but they still were not being taken that seriously. They were still trying to defend themselves. And this is where I think Gareth Jones was so important in the sound of Depeche Mode. And here's an interesting thing just off the bat, is that the Construction Time Again album, Gareth actually told me, he said he's not credited as a producer on that. He said he is credited as the Tone Meister. And indeed, if you go onto Wikipedia, if that can be taken seriously, you can look at what it says. The Wikipedia page says, produced by Daniel Miller and Depeche Mode, and Gareth Jones is credited as the Tone Meister. Tone Meister, a German word, tone meaning sound, Meister meaning master. So we have to consider the Depeche Mode history. Remember, Gareth Jones was reluctant to work with this band because Gareth has always had his heart in the sort of experimental realms. And of course, I've known Gareth for nearly 2 years now, and having spent time with him, I've gotten to learn, his taste and everything. And he's very much I don't want to say an off-the-wall guy, but his tastes in music are very experimental, a little bit avant-garde and very experimental. But this is exactly what this band needed, because they were trying to shake that teeny bopper vibe. And we do remember that it was John Fox that convinced Gareth Jones to work with this band, because he was not keen. He didn't want to. And how different it would have been if, Gareth never worked with them. I still think the band would go on to have success, but it is my sincere belief that if Gareth never got involved, I don't think they would be where I don't think we'd still be talking about them today, because it was the combination between Martin's songs and this innovation. Now, if you ever meet Gareth, and we'll talk about that in this event coming up later on, stay right where you are. Gareth is a very modest, a very humble man. And every time you try to credit him or, bring a bit of recognition to him, he always deflects it. And he always goes, no, it's the band, it's Martin's songs. He doesn't put himself down, but he always deflects the praise, and, which makes me respect him a lot more. But it was Gareth's innovation, his experimental enthusiasm. And I mean, Gareth now is, he's... Sorry, Gareth, I have to tell them, but he's nearly 70 years old. You wouldn't say that when you speak to him, because he has the energy of a 20-year-old. And if you look back in Depeche Mode documentaries and stuff, Martin used to say that Gareth is incredibly hyperactive, and he is still incredibly childlike and enthusiastic. And I think that was very, very important. So regardless of whether he was, credited as an official producer, he was fundamental and very, very important to the sound. And of course, it was after the success of Construction Time again that Daniel Miller, who was friends with Gareth, now invited Gareth to officially produce Some Great Reward and then Black Celebration. And, we all know the story of Black Celebration, where the work ethic was that we're going to spend 3 months every single day and not leave, and it's going to, and that definitely gave it that claustrophobic sound. Without getting off track, this period was very, very important because, as I say, it was a very exciting time. It was a time where synthesizers were very, very sought after. They were not only very creative and experimental and out there and advanced, they were also beyond the price range of the average musician. So they did have a certain mystique, and I just think it's like a grand synchronicity of the right songs coming around at the right time, the right people. And that is why this period was so important, was because that creativity, along with this band needing this, they really needed this. They really needed someone to help them, break away from that teeny bopper vibe and to be taken seriously. But also what was very clever about the way they did it was Daniel was very keen for them to have commercial success. And that is a fine line to play with a band like this, because let's face it, certainly if you listen to the first album, Speak and Spell, that was very commercial. The second album, less so. But certainly the way Martin writes, all in minor keys and stuff like that, well, mainly in minor keys, he does lean to a very sort of unconventional, underground, not mainstream sound. But this is where they towed the line so perfectly. Songs like People Are People, Master and Servant did get good radio play, although they didn't get, huge chart positions in the UK. They did manage to break into the mainstream. And I think this was the challenge, was to get your music into the charts, but without getting it too poppy. And this was the fine balance. This is where I think Gareth was so important, was helping them make the music commercial enough to get it into the charts, but at the same time, not making it so commercial that they sacrifice their sound. So I always say Depeche Mode has, two legs in the underground scene and one arm and its head kind of above the pulpit into the commercial scene. So they kind of retain their credibility, managed to get into mainstream radio, but at the same time bring the experimentation. And I always say this is on top of the great songs that Martin wrote. It is also that sound that, Gareth helped them, and Daniel as well, helped them cultivate, that just really made this band. Because up until this point, You know, you had the mainstream pop and then you had the experimental stuff. But Depeche Mode really were unique in the sense that they had these songs that weren't conventionally poppy, although I suppose you could define it as the larger genre of pop. And it was very experimental, but they managed to also present it in a way that was quite marketable. And on top of the fact that you had this front man who was incredibly energetic, handsome. In fact, they were all very, very good looking. They were heartthrobs and they ticked every box. So I could go off topic right here. So let's divert. I do believe that it was the fact that sampling was in its infancy and the fact that you had so many technical limitations to the gear that helped give music its sound at that time. And what I mean by that is, yeah, if we look at modern technology these days, which is amazing when it comes to music production, but it has made things a lot easier. And I'm a big believer in the saying that necessity is the mother of invention. You know, it's when you have limitations that you have to think harder. Now, I'm not against technology, certainly not, but there seems to be a certain laziness that is seeped into music production these days. And certainly coming back to these days, it was so difficult to achieve a good sound because, you know, your default position was quite basic. But still, listen to the records from that period, these 3 records, and they do stand up. They are sonically great. I'm just going to run through some of the original Depeche Mode sound banks here. I mean, these sounds by today's standard are quite basic, but there is still something about them. And indeed, when I got my hands on an emulator 2 recently and played the samples through that, there is an innovation and a sonic character, which is very synonymous with the sort of EMU machines, by the way, which I'll talk about later. Once again, just the lack of technology that was available at the time, combined with the creativity and the innovation and the desire to be the best, is what really drove this band and really gave them an incredibly innovative sound. Just a few examples there. And of course, if you're a resident on this channel, you will know that I have my in-depth Depeche Mode album review series, which is ongoing, and you can see me breaking down the songs and a lot more. And interestingly enough as well, if you like the sounds, if you're a geek and you'd like to learn more about this, you'll be very happy to know that I've teamed up with my wingman, Simon Forsyth, and we are busy working on a series which we're calling The Synths That Made Mode. And now I want to share with you some great news. Check this out. October the 17th, 2022, here in London, we're going to be having this exclusive, never been seen before, never been done before event. Your chance to meet Gareth Jones and Brian Griffin. This will be here in a local pub. It's going to be, we've got the whole venue to ourselves. It's going to be very, very relaxed and very, very chilled. So don't feel intimidated. Just come down. You're going to be amongst good people. And it's really just going to be like a live version of the channel. So we'll bring out Brian, we will bring out Gareth, and then I will do kind of like an interview with them. And then the microphone will go out to the audience and you can get to ask them your questions, anything you want to ask them about, you know, the Berlin Trilogy or anything about their careers so far as Brian as a photographer or Gareth as a music producer. Also, will then be treated to a live set. Gareth Jones, yes, the master himself, will have his modular synths there, and he's going to treat us to a live electrogenetic set. So I'm very, very pleased to be able to bring this to you. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. a great opportunity to meet like-minded people from the community, to meet the legends Gareth and Brian, but also to celebrate these great 3 albums and, you know, ask the questions you've always wanted to ask. The full details regarding this event can be found in the link in the description below, so do click on that and just hit me if you've got any questions and I'll be glad to answer them. Right, my friend, it's up to you now. What did you think of the Berlin Trilogy? Anything you want to say about the Berlin Trilogy or about this video? I'd love to hear your comments and connect with you. Besides that, take care, keep well, and I hope to see you on the next video. Lots of love. Adios.